Welcome everybody to the COP Drop, a daily live stream during COP28. My name is Gopal Patel, the co-convener of the Faiths for Biodiversity Coalition. I'm not joined today by my co-host Lauren Van Ham from the United Religions Initiative, but I'm delighted to have Kamran. Kamran, you have two last names. You'll have to correct me. Kamran Shezad or Kamran Fazil from the Bahu Trust. He's the executive director there from Birmingham, but currently in Dubai. Kamran, let's start off. What is your full name?
My full name is actually Kamran Shezad Fazil,
Got it.
and historically it's been Kamran Fazil, and then somebody started using Kamran Shezad, and that just stuck. So either one is fine.
All right, good. Well, I'm glad we cleared that up. How are you doing? How's COP been for you?
Um, well, I'm good. COP is slightly discombobulating. There's
How so?
lots going on everywhere. This year's COP is huge. It's like a mini city. So to get from one place to I mean, my feet are sore every day.
Right.
Um, it's very much a festival type thing
Mm-hmm.
going on. So the side events, the pavilions, the exhibitions that are going on, I mean, they're in full swing.
Right.
Um, and then you've got the negotiating going on, and I think sometimes these sightings can become a distraction. I mean, they're great, they're
Mm-hmm.
wonderful that they're happening. You're learning new things, but there's lots of serious work going on behind the scene.
Right.
And sometimes I feel that as observers, we
Mm.
should be observing and keeping an eye on what's happening at
Yeah.
COP
Right.
rather than enjoying the festivities,
Mm.
which kind of it feels strange in that sense.
Right.
Um,
Right. So how have you then how have you tried to navigate that balance and that tension?
at the moment, I have to be honest, I've been involved mainly in the side events just because of the invitations beforehand.
Yeah.
Tomorrow's a rest day, and then over the weekend, I'll start being more involved in the observation. And the Sakugakai have kindly allowed me to shadow them so I can learn from them
Oh,
and what
nice.
they're doing.
Mm.
But I think more needs to be done um, to help people understand the role of observation
Right.
organizations and what you can do to further enhance what
Mm.
it is the world needs right now.
Yeah.
But Dubai knows how to put on a show. That's for sure. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so what is the significance of a climate COP happening in the Middle East? I think it may not be the first one, but it's the first one that I can remember. I've been tracking the COP since Paris in 2015. So
Yeah.
what's the sentiment? What's the feeling like in Dubai, but in the wider region about having such a moment there?
Um, I mean, you're more of a veteran than I am. You know about these things. Um, from a Gulf perspective, I mean, Gulf countries, the Persian Gulf, they produce around what 35% of the world's crude oil
Mm.
globally each year. Um, I have no issue, me personally, of Dubai or a Gulf country or even an oil producing country hosting the COP. I have no issue with that. And if we start picking and choosing, then we get into all sorts of territories. Um, but I do think there needs to be a bit more oversight
Mm.
of um, presidencies. Maybe have co-presidency, because it's important. There'd be a time where governments hold companies to account and corporates to account. Now we're
Right.
living in times where fossil fuel companies and corporates hold governments to account,
Mm.
and they hold them to ransom.
Right.
So if you have oil producing countries at the head of the table, I mean,
Mm.
we've already heard reports already. I mean, a
Sure.
number of reports around oil deals allegedly being done during
Mhm.
COP, or the science being denied,
Right.
um, and various other things. And that doesn't really help the credibility uh,
Mm.
of holding COP in such countries.
Right.
And so, in my opinion, like, I'm not against COP. I think COP is a process that
Mhm.
it's difficult to replicate. but the
Sure.
process needs to be overhauled,
Right.
and we're really going into serious mode.
Mm,
So the way COP is held needs to reflect that rather than
right.
become a holiday destination.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that kind of nuance and that balance. And I'm wondering, how does, not that you do, but how does the Muslim world, not that you speak on behalf of the Muslim world, but how does the Muslim world respond when it hears these criticisms of the COP and the presidency and the possible oil deals being done, and and so on? Because I would imagine in many ways the Muslim world is celebrating the fact that there's a big moment happening in the Middle East, and then when these news reports come out,
Mm.
how are your networks, how are your friends in the Muslim world reacting to that?
I mean, the term Muslim world is quite vague
Sure. Yeah,
because
yeah. So
even
yeah,
within the Muslim world,
educate me and educate our viewers. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I mean, even in the Arab world, for
Okay,
instance, you've got the
fine.
Gulf
Yeah.
countries, and then you've got
Hmm.
the other Arab states, and then
Sure.
you've got. I mean, whenever the Muslim world sees any large major event taking
Mm,
place in a Muslim country, obviously it's celebrated.
right.
The World Cup in Qatar
Hmm. Hmm.
being the latest, the earlier example. But then you what tends to put the Muslim countries off, is criticism quite often from the Western countries.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's okay for, say, the United States to hold a COP or a World Cup or so
Mm,
on so. And then that then shifts the conversation from
right.
where it really should be.
Hmm.
And even now, some of, say, with Dubai, I mean, I don't know whether they're true or not, but when you have certain news agencies reporting it who've
Hmm.
already lost their credibility,
Mm,
the way they report other things that are happening in the Muslim world, it just, again, it takes the attention away.
right.
Um, so it then all comes down to, well, the United Nations are not neutral, so and so the big
Mm,
other big countries are not neutral, and it becomes an us versus them argument.
right.
And so I suppose the details we'll know the result at the
Hmm.
end of COP28.
Yeah.
Is it COP28 or will it be flop 28?
Mm,
That's the only time to really judge it.
right.
And the Muslim world, I think it's more the poorer countries that are looking for results in
Okay.
this, because it's the poorer Muslim countries, and they're not any different to countries who are not Muslims in that
Right.
sense.
Right.
Um, and people see that when you're holding an event like this in a rich country, regardless of where they're from or which
Hmm.
religious background, it's the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. What's in
Right.
it for them
Yeah.
ultimately? You
Yeah.
know, in these countries, it's not just, we also have labor laws that need to be looked at.
Hmm.
These Gulf countries are not just being built on oil money, but also on the backs of South Asian
Hmm.
workers, African workers, workers from the Far
Right.
East. There's so many issues there that
Right.
need.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. And I guess, so you're doing so much work in Muslim communities around raising awareness of climate change, biodiversity loss, other environmental issues. And you recently worked on a publication, I think it's called Al Mizan.
yeah.
I'd love for you to share what that document or that product is.
Okay. Al Mizan's quite a wonderful document, a framework which is being released soon.
What does it mean, Al Mizan? What does that mean in English?
So Al Mizan is an Arabic word. It means balance.
Okay.
Um, and it comes from a chapter in the Holy Quran, Surah Ar-Rahman, the chapter of mercy.
Okay.
And it's very much an environmental chapter.
Mm,
And it talks about what nature provides and that we must maintain justice and not skimp the balance. So enjoy the bounties that nature gives you, but what you take with one hand, you give back with the other.
mm.
So that there must always be a balance, not extreme one side or the other.
Right. Right.
It's been in the planning for quite some time, but Pope Francis Laudato Si has kind of further inspired us to just get on with
Mm.
it.
Okay.
Um, uh, And so there's been a group of scholars who have come together and produced some very beautiful words and framework on, and I'll go through that with you in a second, on what an Islamic framework should be on care for creation.
Okay.
Um, so the plan was to launch it at COP28,
Right.
but we just felt there was so much going on at
Mm,
COP28, it
right.
would have just been hidden. It wouldn't have had
Sure.
the huge the oomph that we wanted.
Yep.
So the plan is now to launch it at the United Nations Environment Assembly.
Okay. Okay. And what do you hope the result is from is it a document? Is it a policy paper? Is it religious teaching? Like, what's the nature of it? If how much, as much as you can share.
Okay. It's a document. It's not a policy paper. It's very beautifully worded
Mm,
Word document, I suppose, which very gently, if a Muslim was to read it, it would it would be like your parents stroking you and teaching you about careful creation and how nature and biodiversity is at the center of our
mm,
faith.
right.
Um, and I have heard this criticism that, oh, but it's just another document, it's another
Mm,
statement, and we have so many of those, which is true.
sure.
Um, but words matter.
Mm,
Words can have influence. If you look at just talking about Muslims, the Quran has influenced 2 billion Muslims around the world. You
right.
know, the Bible has done the same with Christians and so have the other faiths.
Hmm.
The way this has been written is so beautiful.
Hmm.
And so we're hoping that we can engage different people from different sectors and different backgrounds to make it their own and manifest it in their way. So it's
Mm,
the inspiration. So I think
right.
that's the next challenge after it's being launched.
Yeah. Give us some examples of Islamic teachings on nature and biodiversity, if you can.
Okay. So for instance, it goes through ecocide as
Mm,
um, something that we should recognize, but
okay.
not just as a point of law, but a
Mm.
point of faith.
And is that
Um,
something in Islamic teaching that it's, I don't want to I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is it like a
yeah.
sin? Is it an offense against God to commit ecocide?
You're better at promoting it than I am, Gopal. Um, but yes, it goes through all this, and it makes the relationship between damaging nature and biodiversity and
Mm,
damaging your relationship with God.
got it. Mm,
Because the earth is a is the artistic work of God.
right.
It's an
Hmm.
amana, as we call it.
Mm,
It's a responsibility. So if we're degrading it here, we're
yeah.
degrading the artist's work. You know, you can't love the creator if you can't love his
Hmm.
creation.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it'll only be if you, and then it also goes through describing examples of him and harems, which is all about environmental conservation zones that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, set up 1400 years. So it's not a new environmental issue.
Right.
We're recapturing learning that has
Mm,
been lost over the decades, if not over
yeah.
the last centuries. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I'm wondering, when you launch it, you said you're launching at UNEA, United Nations Environment Assembly, I think end of February, right, in Nairobi.
It's
Fingers
crossed.
crossed. Yeah, hopefully we'll be together there.
Yes.
You're launching it there, and I look back at the launch of Laudato Si, and what I see, and I haven't really spoken to my Catholic friends about this, but the Pope released that in 2015, but it didn't really get a lot of traction in the way that maybe he and others high up in the Catholic world thought it would. And so, in many sense, what they had to do was create a vehicle, an instrument to kind of spread Laudato Si. So they first created the Global Catholic Climate Movement, and then that turned into the Laudato Si movement. And now that has a number of programs and institutions all around the world which are really popularizing the teachings of Laudato Si. And you mentioned there the Quran has 2 billion followers, and the Bible similarly, and other faiths. And so what you see is that you need to have the teaching, but then you need to have an infrastructure to get that teaching out to the people. Otherwise, it's just another document. So I'm wondering, is the Almazan team working on that infrastructure post-launch to make sure it does reach as many Muslim communities as possible?
So that's one of the biggest challenges
Mm,
we have to overcome, and it's something we're working on. Laudato Si, I mean, the difference between the Muslims and the Catholics is the Catholics have a central leader, the Pope,
Right,
Pope
right.
Francis, and he also
Hold on,
comes with
you're not the
credibility.
central leader for the Muslims in the world, Cameron?
No, I'd be a rubbish leader. Um, yeah, it's only my kids who, who see me as their
And I'm
boss.
sure even they don't listen to you most of the time as well.
No, no. Well, they did, but the eldest is 9 now, and he quite often is a lot more intelligent than me. Um, so we don't have a central body that
Mm,
can disseminate the message. So
right.
we'll and that was reflected in Al Mizan when we scripted it, when we
Hmm.
drafted it. We sent it to everybody to consult with.
Right.
But then also, in order to create that movement, the Vatican or the Catholic movement, they have
Sure.
lots of resources that they can tap into.
Hmm.
So we have to work towards that.
Okay.
And we've taken lots of inspiration and learning from Laudato Si movement. We don't
Mm,
have to replicate or reinvent the wheel in that sense.
mhm.
We've already seen what they've done, and we can
Right.
just look at replicating it. And we're
Yeah.
hoping, and we've had lots of conversations of how do we do joint work, and
Mm,
how do we work together on certain things, and how do we.
right.
So there's already been lots of excitements between the upcoming Al Mizan movement
Right.
and also Laudato Si movement.
And where do you hope the change happens? Are you looking at change from like the Muslim leadership level or the more community grassroots level, or are you trying to, do the whole span of that spectrum?
It's going to have to come from
Mm,
different kind of directions. So
right. Right.
from imams, from the community, from youth,
Mm,
um, on the campaigning and advocacy level. Um, and I think that will come afterwards.
right.
We But we're hoping, we want the main thing is to create a spiritual transformation.
Hmm.
So we want Muslims to start looking at climate change or environmental degradation from a different perspective. We want them to start looking at their scriptures from a different perspective, look at it from a lens of, well, the earth is suffering now.
Right.
We need to start looking at everything as an act of worship to tackle
Mm,
this. If you're writing to your MP, it's not just because you don't like your local MP but because it's a kind of divine responsibility that comes from above, that
right.
you want your brownie points, to be able to say, even if we didn't solve climate change,
Mm,
we are answerable to a higher power.
right.
You need to be able to answer for what you as an individual did.
And
So
how are you trying to navigate the silos between climate change and biodiversity? Obviously, this is COP28. We're focused on biodiversity. Nature is becoming more of a topic in the climate space, and we were together last year in Montreal during the CBD COP15. So how is Al Mizan or the work you're doing in Muslim communities trying to bridge that gap between climate and biodiversity, recognizing that they are two sides of the same crisis?
I think the main thing is the use of language,
Mm,
and not overbearing and not overwhelming people.
right,
Me personally, my line of work, because I work within communities, because I'm very embedded in the mosque work that I do.
right.
So climate change goes way over everybody's head. It's a
Mm,
science that not everybody understands, and
right.
they, as individuals, can't do much.
Hmm.
When you talk to people about nature,
Mm,
they instantly switch on.
right.
And actually, yes, I can do something about this. When you
Mm,
relate to insects and biodiversity and ecology, and then when they get that, then you relate that to climate change.
right,
Um,
right.
but everyone's playing their role. That's on the
Hmm.
grassroots level.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
within Al Mizan, the majority of Al Mizan is more about nature and biodiversity
Mm,
than is about fossil fuels and everything else,
right,
because
right.
nature is like the veins of the planet.
For sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
so if you don't solve the nature crisis,
Mm,
you won't be able to solve the climate crisis.
yeah.
Uh, so that just it's not a short term
Hmm.
kind of plan. When you ram it in people's faces, people switch off.
For
So
sure.
it's we're going to have to have patience and perseverance
Yeah.
and let the politicians deal with the time factor. You know?
Yeah. And can you give us an example of a Muslim community that you're working with that's doing work on the ground on biodiversity? Because I know you're working in Africa and other part in the UK and other parts of the world. Love for viewers to hear about a project that you're really inspired by, that you're involved in.
I'll give you two very quick examples. One, I'm involved in an eco village in Tanzania, um, a children's eco village.
Love
So one of the very first things we did there was do ecosystem restoration and replanted trees, and we were even successful in um, there was a stream that we were told by some of the elders that dried out 50 years ago,
Hmm.
and we were able
Wow.
to get the water going. It took us 10 years,
Hmm.
but we got the water going just by planting certain type of trees, and then over time, as it rained, it would replenish the aquifers. Um, Another project in UK was the Balsall Heath Nature Map, which
Balsall Heath, where's that? I heard it's a really special place. Where is that?
Balsall Heath is like if you watch Peaky Blinders, you'll know Balsall that it's primarily set in Small Heath and Balsall Heath. You should visit
Well,
one day.
I mean, I don't know if I need a visa to go there or not, but Balsall Heath is in the Midlands. Is that right, near Birmingham?
Yeah, it's in Birmingham. What's it famous for? I can't think, but Peaky Blinders would be the best example. But we bought some of the mosques and churches to come together and draw a nature map
Hmm.
because we do lots of interfaith work and we
Yeah.
celebrate diversity amongst us,
Right.
but we don't celebrate the biodiversity within our
Hmm.
communities. So we created a wonderful map where we all highlighted areas of nature and green and beauty around us.
I love that.
Um, and I mean, if our viewers were to Google nature map
Yeah.
Balsall Heath, it would
Hmm.
come to the top. And that
Yeah,
was
that's
to just
great.
put awareness of nature in people's minds. And when they
Hmm.
see the mosque and church lead it, it
Hmm.
kind of normalizes it a little bit more.
Yeah. Wow. Two amazing examples. Tanzania restoring ecosystems there. And then real tangible. I love that we celebrate diversity, but we also need to celebrate biodiversity as well. And a multi-faith eco map sounds great. Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes so viewers can find it afterwards. And I think I remember seeing it in Montreal last year at COP15, and I think a lot of people were very, very, very impressed and inspired to do something similar in their own places of worship. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cameron, I think this has been an excellent conversation. Is there any further thoughts, your reflections you want to share on the COP28 process so far?
Um, it, I just feel a little bit disappointed. Like in previous
Hmm.
COPs, you get lots of various smaller wins that are announced. We haven't
Right.
had too many of those at the moment of,
Hmm.
like feel good stories or, we've had, again, we hear lots of pledges and commitments, and I
Hmm.
know they then need to be turned into law.
Right.
I just hope we get something really cool at the end of this. Like,
Sure.
I'd be happy even with a small win. And uh, having an oil magnet at the top of it is kind of, I get why that someone important needs to be around the table, but I
Yeah.
really hope that they can show that they can convince other fossil fuel companies that they need to
Mm.
phase out and convert to renewable like
Yeah.
as quickly
Yeah.
as possible.
Yeah. Well, we'll wait with bated breath to see what happens. We're about to come into start the second week of COP soon, and we'll see what happens in a week's time. But thank you so much, Cameron, for joining us today. And I know it's in the evening there, and you said you're staying 2 hours away from the COP venue, so we appreciate, you going back to your place before jumping on the live stream. Really appreciate that. And thank you everyone for watching. This has been the COP Drop from the Face of Biodiversity Coalition and the United Religions Initiative. Tomorrow we'll be joined. We have a special session tomorrow because it is the rest day there in Dubai at COP28. So we're giving a rest to our friends there in Dubai, and we'll be joined by Carrick Reddin from the World Resources Institute and Asmira Alibai from the United Nations Environment Programme Faith for Earth Initiative, where we'll have a special 1 hour session doing a bit more of a deeper dive into what's happened at COP over the first week and what we're looking forward to for the second week. But for now, we'll see you again tomorrow.